President Pence swears in our new NASA administrator, a Hubble anniversary fly-through of a nebula, and the smell in the clouds of one of our outermost planets. A few of the stories to tell you about this week at NASA.
I, James Bridenstine, do solemnly swear.
Jim Bridenstine officially took office as the 13th administrator of NASA on April 23rd, after he was given the oath of office by Vice President Mike Pence at the agency's headquarters in Washington.
Mission success depends on more than just resources alone. It requires leadership. You need clear, ambitious goals. That's exactly the kind of leadership that you will have starting today with NASA's new administrator, Jim Bridenstine.
The event also featured live greetings from our astronauts living and working in space.
Congratulations on your selection to lead NASA as you report to duty. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Bridenstine, welcome on board the International Space Station.
NASA represents what is best about the United States of America. I will do my best to serve our storied agency to the utmost of my abilities as we reach for new heights and reveal the unknown for the benefit of humankind. Thank you so much.
This virtual fly-through into the core of the Lagoon Nebula was made with imagery from our Hubble Space Telescope in celebration of the telescope's 28th anniversary in space. The Lagoon Nebula is a rich star-birth region in the constellation Sagittarius. It has a young star named Herschel 36 that is about 200,000 times brighter and 32 times more massive than our Sun. A long-standing mystery about the clouds on the planet Uranus has been solved. Researchers using the Gemini Observatory's telescope in Hawaii gathered spectroscopic data that shows the planet's cloud tops contain hydrogen sulfide, the odoriferous gas that reeks of rotten eggs. Human visitors wouldn't have to worry about the stench, though. Exposure to the planet's extremely frigid and volatile atmosphere would take its toll long before the smell. The Mars Insight Roadshow is stopping at cities along the earthquake-prone California coast to explain how our InSight robotic lander will study Mars's deep interior using seismology and other geophysical measurements. The launch from California's Vandenberg Air Force Base, scheduled for May 5th, will be the first interplanetary launch from the West Coast. The U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame inducted its two newest members on April 21st. Scott Altman, a veteran of 4 space shuttle flights, including STS-125, the final servicing mission to the Hubble Space Telescope, and Dr. Tom Jones, whose 4th and final space shuttle mission, STS-98, delivered the Destiny Laboratory to the International Space Station, were both inducted during a ceremony at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex in Florida. That's what's up this week at NASA. For more on these and other stories, follow us on the web at nasa.gov/twan.
Imagine the sights and sounds of a forest. Sunbeams slicing the darkness. The whistles and rustling of life surround you. Now imagine swimming through an underwater forest. Here, there are no trees. Instead, 150-foot tall seaweeds called giant kelp tower above you. Our national marine sanctuaries are home to magnificent kelp forests that host an endless variety of fish, invertebrates, and plants. Like trees in a forest, kelp can grow in dense stands, offering crucial hiding places that protect local residents from predators. But unlike trees, kelp can grow more than 2 feet a day. And it has no roots. Kelp grips the bottom with claw-like holdfasts that anchor it to the seafloor. Sea urchins, a common resident of the kelp forest, can chew through holdfasts, causing the kelp to lose its grip and float away. Normally, sea otters eat enough of the sea urchins to keep them in check, and the kelp forests thrive. But if sea urchin numbers get too high, they overgraze and destroy the kelp habitat, leaving a barren, deserted landscape. 4 national marine sanctuaries do regular surveys to track kelp forest conditions, understand natural cycles and human impacts, and protect these majestic towers of life.
NOAA's work spans from the bottom of the sea to the surface of the sun. Each day, our employees take the pulse of the changing world around us and share that knowledge with others to ensure public safety, protect and restore marine resources, and strengthen our economy. Our people are as diverse as our mission. We are scientists, engineers, researchers, technicians, and more who live the mission every day. We are also the staff who support the mission behind the scenes.
What I love about my job is that every day we get to see things that nobody has seen before, or in ways that nobody has seen it before.
NOAA's roots reach back more than 200 years. These agencies helped build the foundation of today's NOAA.
We constantly find new and creative, innovative ways to get our message of life-saving information to the public.
Science is the foundation for all we do. As we conduct world-class research and use cutting-edge technology to explore our seas, forecast our weather, understand our climate, protect our coasts, manage our fisheries, and chart our waterways.
It's the intangibles that matter more than anything else. It's not the paycheck, it's not the steady employment, it really is the science. You have a chance to be part of something bigger than just a commercial organization, and that's what NOAA's about.
Our work touches the lives of every American and powers the economy as we work in collaboration with our partners to transform our data and research into real-world applications that inform critical decision-making and protect the people, systems, and services essential to our nation.
And liftoff.
I love the mission, I love the work that we do, the people that are involved in this organization.
We are united in our common mission: science, service, stewardship.
There are up to 8.3 million children in daycares, preschools, and other early care and education centers in the U.S., and people assume that these early care and education centers are safe places for children to learn and grow. But what if we told you that's not always true? Because right now, up to 1 in 8 children could be in a child care building that hasn't been properly assessed for harmful chemicals. In most states, there's no clear process to make sure early care and education centers are located safely, so they've been in or near some pretty dangerous places, like factories, old gas station sites, and dry cleaners. Children may be at risk of contact with some very harmful materials, like mercury, lead, and radon. Children are more sensitive to these materials than adults because their bodies are still growing, and they can have serious and irreversible health effects, including kidney damage, learning difficulties, and cancer. We know you already work hard to protect children's health in your state, and you can build on those efforts to make sure that early care and education centers are located safely. We have resources that can help your state develop an action plan and build important partnerships between different sectors, like state health agencies, policymakers, and licensing agencies. So together, you can make environmental safety a key consideration when a new center is being approved. Partnering together can prevent potential tragedies and has other big benefits, like building trust in communities and lowering legal and liability costs. Learn how to protect children in early care and education centers and create an action plan for your state, because our kids are worth it.
I grew up in Mexico in a very small farm town that deals with a lot of agriculture, and people are very aware of the changes that are occurring. They don't necessarily understand why it's happening. They just know the rain season comes at this month, and it comes like really close to this time, and for some reason it's not coming, or it came early, and people adjust the way that they're working their crops based on that time. People tend to think in the present, and when someone tells you, oh, things are changing because so-and-so is blooming, you know, a few days later, people think it's not a big deal. It just rained later or earlier. It doesn't really matter. But I think nowadays people can become a little bit more informed as to what's going on. So what gives me hope for the future is being able to do projects like this, where you can actually make the observations and you can take the data set and show people, you know, this is actually happening, this is actually changing. I think that'll give people an understanding of why it's important to focus on climate change and why they should look at the impact that they're making on the world.
People were out observing the aurora, and they started noticing something that was overhead as well when they were seeing the aurora far to the northern regions. It was unlike most aurora. Talked to the scientists, we didn't know what it was, and together they said, we'll keep taking observations and we'll call it Steve in the meantime. Steve is mostly a very narrow purple arc, and sometimes it has these little green features that go along with it as well that are kind of like waving fingers or a picket fence. That means that there's plasma physics happening up there to cause that light and to make these little discrete features that we don't understand yet. We now have some satellite observations from the ESA satellite called SWARM that show that Steve optically is associated with a very strong flow in the particles in the ionosphere, the upper level of our atmosphere. Steve is important for a number of reasons. It's really exciting that people armed with cameras all over the globe can capture something that we didn't fully understand and shed new light on that. It's also really exciting that this happens further to the south where there are more people, so it might be a kind of aurora that more people can see than the usual kind. We're now able to look up at the sky and see things about the aurora and this subauroral region that we never understood before, and then we can correlate that with our traditional observations and lead to greater understanding.
It was the summer of 1787, and the Founding Fathers had gathered in Philadelphia to address an ambitious plan. George Washington presided over this constitutional convention, which made a number of far-reaching decisions that continue to guide our nation to this day. The framers had many disputes as to what the Constitution should contain. However, there was no dispute with respect to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, also known as the Patent and Copyright Clause. The Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. These simple yet remarkable words established the U.S. patent system, and in 1790, less than 2 years after the ratification of the Constitution, George Washington signed the first U.S. patent grant to Samuel Hopkins for an improvement in making potash and pearl ash. A patent is truly a significant document both for the inventor and the public which enjoys the benefit of the discovery. The patent provides the right to the inventor to exclude others from making, using, selling, or importing their invention without their permission. It also clearly reflects their creativity, their ingenuity, dedication, and hard work.
In the last 200 years, the patent cover has undergone over a dozen design changes, though in the last century, the design has only changed twice. We looked to a lot of the historic patent designs for inspiration, though I quickly realized there was not a lot of information out there, and we really had to turn over some rocks in order to gather enough examples for us to work from. Some of the best examples we found were from the 19th century. These were incredibly intricate, ornate documents from a bygone era. They looked like what you'd expect to see on currency or stock certificates, and the designs really conveyed the value of what they represented. Looking at these historic designs, it became clear that what we created would have to convey that same sense of value. A team of USPTO designers combined efforts to create the new patent cover. I asked each member of the team to design an improvement to the existing patent cover, a classic version inspired by some of the historical examples, and an anything-goes, clean sheet of paper approach. As designers, a lot of what we work on comes and goes very quickly, so to be able to work on something of such historical significance is a once-in-a-career opportunity. These patent covers will persist for generations in museum collections, in libraries, on the walls of an inventor's great-grandchild. That's something we're all very proud of.
People come here to the Smokies during a particular 2 weeks in June to see synchronous fireflies. And this year, that happened in May, well before the event that was going to start on June the 7th. So when people actually got here on the 7th, not only had the peak passed, but the firefly display was completely finished. Can we say that was because of climate change? No, but if we look at the trend over the years, we can see that some of these, over the years, the events are occurring, earlier than they used to.
Phenology is the time of year that certain events happen in the biological world. So when things flower and when they turn to fruit and when the leaves turn green on a plant, come out and then turn color perhaps in fall, those are all phenological events. When migratory birds come back from the tropics and start singing, set up territories, when they have their nests and when they depart, those are all phenological events.
It can be at the community level or at species level. And this is important because there's a lot of synchrony between species and communities. And if climate change happens too rapidly or if other issues involving climate, temperature and moisture, it could lead to impacts which we need to be aware of. Phenology in this park really started with Arthur Stupka, who was a 1938 appointee to this park as a naturalist and later biologist. And he started recording times when various plants bloomed in different sites. And I don't mean a few times. I mean, he made 18,000 observations having to do with all sorts of different things, and many of those are based on phenology. And we have that in a database that we can now search. And that gives us a good basis for looking at changes, particularly in plants and arrival of birds. We've had plots out now for 10 years, off and on, looking at the same exact 4-meter square area, 3 plots in a site, and then multiple sites at different elevations. And there we actually do counts of individual flowers in full bloom. In some cases, the same species on an elevational transect.
One other thing that we have been recording at the Great Smoky Mountains Institute at Tremont, over on the Tennessee side of the park, the teachers there and the students have been recording the first time they hear wood frogs sing, or the first time they see such and such a plant bloom, or the first time they see a dragonfly. And many of those species have been showing earlier phenology over the past couple of decades. The problem with that kind of data, it's useful, but we want to collect data at very specific locations, repeating them over and over again so that we can figure out not just the first one, but when the peak arrival is or when the peak bloom is. You have to go out and you have to follow an individual tree or an individual set of plants, or go to the same place and listen for birds over the period of time that you might expect them to come back. But that's data for just 1 year. So in order to look for trends, is it getting earlier? Are they coming later? You would need to go back and do the same thing with the same plants, the same site, over and over again for several years. And there's a lot of variation from 1 year to the next. So you would want to have several years to average it out to see a trend.
So the question of identifying what's causing changes in phenology that people are observing over long periods of time, especially in one particular location, is a tricky question because first you have to be able to establish that temperature changes or changes in precipitation are what's driving that, and then you have to understand what's driving those changes in temperature or precipitation at that one place. Because in a lot of different places, temperature change can be because of urbanization or deforestation, and that can cause warming of an environment. Or if you go from agricultural environment to primarily a forested environment, you can get cooling that's just caused by local effects rather than human-caused global climate change. But what allows us to understand that phenological shifts more broadly are attributed to climate change is that we're seeing similar patterns in lots of different locations across the world, so that local climate change can't be the driver of all of them.
I think of the Smokies like a giant English muffin, and we have all these little nooks and crannies. And you know, when you toast an English muffin, it doesn't brown evenly. Well, the Smokies is like that with temperature. So to really sample in the Smokies, you need to really get into all those nooks and crannies, and we just don't have enough park staff to do that. So with citizen scientists and carefully planned out locations of plots, we can actually get people to adopt a plot and go in and help us to collect this data about each little nook and cranny that we're interested in, that we just couldn't do as park rangers. So again, we're hoping that people will develop a relationship and actually start to notice changes that we as park staff might not see, because they're out there maybe on a weekly basis checking the same spot. They're going to really get to know that location and document those changes as opposed to just be anecdotal changes.
7.2. 7.2.
We got it, yes! That one. We caught one!
The reason why citizen science is such a great tool, for one, people like contributing. They like feeling like they're helping. You know, if you give people an opportunity to help collect data that you truly are using, and that's kind of the key. It's not citizen science if that data never gets put into a database, never gets looked at. But if you're truly using that data and people have a way to contribute to that data, they feel good about it, they like doing it, you know, they get that personal connection both with the park and with whatever it is they're studying, and it just, it's a total win-win situation.
But we're going to be tracking this tree over time. Okay. So for this year, it's a 5. Yeah.
I feel that the phenology study in particular has made the issue of climate change more accessible because it's a way for people to relate to it personally. You know, people around here, for instance, are tuned in to spring wildflowers and the leaves changing in the fall because our economy is really tied to the tourism that revolves around some of those events. So there are things that people notice anyway, but if we're letting them know about some of these possible mismatches, it's not just that the flowers are blooming 2 weeks earlier, but there's this whole kind of trickle-down effect that you get if flowers bloom earlier and the pollinators aren't there, and the birds who eat those pollinators, and you know, these things that can go out of synchronicity and out of whack, that there's this whole chain of events. And phenology is just beautiful for illustrating that, and it's happening now. It's not happening conceptually 10 years or 20 years in the future.
Climate change is real, it's happening around the world today. Its effects are measured, seen, and felt in many different ways. And no matter what we'd like to hope, pretend, or just ignore, we've got lots to learn and do. Hey, now that's what this song is for.
Las Vegas, Nevada, one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the United States, has seen its population expand from 273,000 in 1972 to 2.2 million in 2017. Urban development appears as green and purple in this series of Landsat images. Since land covered by man-made asphalt, concrete, and rooftops doesn't let rainwater soak into the ground, Landsat-based mapping is valuable to show how increased water runoff affects groundwater quality, as well as to show the pressure on resources caused by rapidly increasing populations. Also visible in the 2018 image is the Nevada Solar One farm. The project covers 400 acres and generates 64 megawatts of power for 14,000 homes.